How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Battlegrounds Game Center. I'm Patrick, and today we're going to be doing a quick run-through on how to play Halo Flashpoint by Mantic. This is a brand new skirmish miniatures game set in the Halo universe. Essentially, you're going to be playing multiplayer Halo, but on the tabletop. It is a really fun and interesting game, but we're going to be doing a quick overview of all the different actions that you can take. We're not going to go over absolutely every single rule. There are quite a few nuanced rules, like what happens when you get knocked back or if you fall off buildings. We're not going to really go over all that today. We're just going to go over all the different actions you can take, how they work, and how you essentially just play the game. So we're going to get right into it here, and I have a little bit of a demo set up ready to go. This is the board that you'll be playing on. It's set up by 8x8 cubes here. Now this game doesn't use measuring tape to move or anything like that. You essentially, when you're moving your model, you just move cube by cube based off your movement stat. And same thing goes for like moving up terrain and such. So everything you need to play is right in the box. All the miniatures actually come pre-built in the different colors of red versus blue. Now this is the Recon Edition, which they were selling at Gen Con this year. This has 4 models per team, and they're all the same models, so you don't really have any list building or anything like that in this box. But once the new Spartan box comes out in October, you'll have way more options for your different list building that you can do. So the very first thing we're going to do is determine how the game starts. So before you even determine who goes first and everything, you're going to seed the board with different items and weapons. I've already done kind of like a demo version of that. Typically though, for the items, you're going to be rolling your 2d8s, and it's going to be based off your column and row, and you're going to be putting out items face down on the board. These will be pickups that players can grab. And then same thing goes for the weapons. Depending on the scenario, they'll have specific weapon spots that will spawn them. And as you pick them up, new ones will start spawning throughout the different rounds. And of course, those are going to be randomly seeded out onto the board as well. I'm not going to go over how you do that exactly, but you can find it on page 34 of the rulebook during the scenario setup. But to determine who goes first in the game, you're going to each grab a die, you're going to roll it, and then whoever has the highest will get to choose a deployment zone that they want to place all their models in, and each scenario will have their own deployment zone. So like the Slayer scenario would have these 4 cubes here on the edge, and then the 4 cubes on the opposite side for the other team, and then you'll get to place your models however you wish within these cubes. Now when you're placing your models out onto your deployment, or even when you're moving, your fire team will be made up of 4 different models for this version of the game. You'll have more in the future. But when they get out onto the board, you can place them into the different cubes however you wish, except you need to make sure that the center of the base is still within the cube that you're in. But that does mean you can kind of overlap into other cubes, which will become important with like terrain and such. The cube, though, can only hold up to 2 of your models from your fire team and up to 2 models from your enemy fire team. So at most, only 4 models can ever be in a cube. But say I have my model set up like this, my opponent would then have their model set up on the other side of the board. I'm going to kind of bring in models as I need to show examples, but this is just how you would set up your deployment. It's important to keep in mind any cover that you might have in your deployment as well as on the board, because cover is going to help you if you get shot at. So you might want to position your models like, say this guy is still in this cube, but he's behind that piece of equipment, and as well as this model. So now they're in cover, so they're not going to have any bonuses against them whenever the opponent shoots at them. After you deploy your models, the first player will then look at their card here, and then they'll see if they have Scout as a keyword. If you have Scout on any of your cards, starting with the first player, they will pick up that model, and then they can choose to place it 1 square away out of their deployment or wherever they started. So it's kind of like a free movement at the beginning of the game. And then when you move, you can just put it into the cube however you wish, as long as the center of the base is still within that cube. After performing Scout moves, the starting player will then take the first turn in round 1. To win the game, it'll be based off the scenario. So like with Slayer, eliminating a certain amount of opponent models, capture the flag, is scoring so many points using their flag, and so on. There are 6 different scenarios in the book, so there's a lot of different ways to play the game. But your scenario will determine how the game will eventually end. After deployment and determining who's going to go first, each player then is going to take 2 of these blue command dice, which have different symbols on them. And then for every tactician in your fire team, so like this guy here has tactician 1, you get to add an additional die. And then you're going to roll these dice, and then these are going to determine special actions that you can take, essentially like free actions during a round. So you'll roll them, you'll see what you get. All the different symbols we'll kind of go over as they become relevant, but there's essentially free shooting, free movement, additional dice, free attacks, free activations, and so on. And there's also a special order side, which we will go over once that becomes relevant. But then if you have Tactician as well, you can choose one of the dice depending on the number there, so 1 or 2, however many, and then you get to re-roll at least one of them. And then after rolling your Tactician here, that has 1 or 2 or however many it's going to say, depending on what card you have, you'll get to pick up a die for each one of those numbers, and you can re-roll them if you wish. So that is something to keep in mind as well. But after that step, you're going to set those to the side, and then the first player is going to pick one of their models to take their activation. When you're activating, you have a list of actions here that are going to have short or long. You can take 2 short actions in your turn, or you can take 1 long action. So essentially, you can move and shoot, or you could sprint with the long action, and that's all you're doing. This is where the command dice come into play, because the command dice are going to give you additional shoots for additional attacks, additional moves, and these are all free actions, so they don't count towards your short or long. So it's important to keep in mind what you have while you're activating a model. So let's go ahead and go over all of the different actions here, starting with Advance. So Advance is going to be your basic movement. And when you look at your card for the model that you're activating, you're going to have a few different stats here. You're going to have SP, which is your speed. So this is going to apply to your movement. You're going to have the number at the front, followed by a dash, and then a second number. What this means is the number in the front is going to be your advance movement. So right now it would be a 1, so that character could move 1 space. The second number is going to be your sprint movement, which is a long action, and that'll allow you to move up to 3 spaces, or it'll be 2 or 3 and so on. So advancing and sprinting work exactly the same way. They're your basic movements, except for advance is a short action and sprint is a long action. An important thing to keep in mind though is that you can never do a short action more than once during your turn. So you couldn't advance twice. So you'd have to either choose 1 advance or you could take the sprint. The command dice override this rule because you could take an advance with this advance die as a free action. But we'll go over that here in a second. So when you're moving, you're going to choose the model that you wish to activate. You're going to look at their speed. So say I'm activating my Spartan Zvezda here, and he has a speed of 1-3. So if I take an advance action, I'll be able to move him 1 space. If I take a sprint action, I can move him up to 3 spaces. When you do your movements, you're going to pick the cube you're going to move into, and then you can position your model however you wish within that cube. So say I'm here in this cube here, and I want to move into this cube for my 1 movement. I can move him into this cube, and then I can position him how I want. So I might position him behind this cover so that he doesn't have any bonuses against him when he's getting shot. You can move orthogonally, or you can also move diagonally in this game. When you're moving diagonally though, you have to look at your shortest path to the space. So right now, the 2 orthogonal spaces next to me are completely clear, so moving diagonally is no problem. However, there could be a situation where you might have a solid wall that's blocking one side, or even a crate that's blocking the other side. And this right now creates a block on the shortest path to the diagonal space. So you wouldn't be able to move through this because these 2 things are blocking that. You could move up here as for 1 space and then move down if you had, like, say, 2 movement, but you couldn't move diagonally because this wall is blocking. But for the sake of example, I can move my character into this cube because there's nothing blocking me from doing so. So I'll move him into this cube, and then I can place him however I wish into the cube. So when you move into a cube that has an item or a weapon, you get to pick these up for free. They don't count towards any of your actions. So I can pick up this item here, and I would place it onto my card. You can have at max 2 items on your character, and you can also drop items at any time. Say instead I decide to move into the cube that has the weapon. You can choose to pick it up, add it to your character. You're going to find their correlating card, place it to the side of them, and then that is going to be a new weapon option you have whenever you're making attacks, so whether it's a ranged or a melee attack. If you are ever taken out by shooting in a turn and you're carrying a weapon, you will drop the weapon at a respawn point, and then basically when you get respawned, you can pick that weapon back up. Or if an opponent ends up taking you out during an assault action, which is melee, they have the option to steal that weapon from you and add it to theirs. You can also freely drop weapons at any time back onto the board so that maybe some of your other characters can pick them up. So that would be an advance action for that character. He gets to move 1 space, and that is a short action, so he can take another short action, like say shooting and so on. But say he decided to sprint instead. This character's sprint is going to be up to 3 spaces. So they're going to want to try to get up here so they have better coverage. So when taking a sprint, they can move through any of these cubes here. Now when running through a cube that has a piece of terrain, you can freely move through that piece of terrain as long as it is 50% or lower than the cube itself. So like any of these pieces here that are just kind of like barriers for shooting, you can move over them no problem. If they were a cube, you would have to go up on top of it, just something like a container or a tower like that over there. He can move through this freely, so that is one movement. And then, since there is diagonal movement in this game, he can move diagonally up this container, taking the shortest path that's available to him orthogonally. There's nothing blocking these like a wall or anything like that, so he can just move up to here, no problem. And of course, when he moves in, there's an item here, so he can choose to pick this up, and it would go to his character card, and you can have a max of 2 items in your card at any time. So taking a sprint would be a long action, and then now his turn is done. However, he could have some command dice that have some free actions on them, so something like maybe he has a free movement, which he could spend before or after he takes any actions, and then that would allow him to move up to 1 cube away as a free movement. Or say he maybe even had a free shoot that he could spend to shoot. He could also use both of these. So you can use any number of these, you just can't use the same 2 times in a turn. So I couldn't say shoot my normal action, shoot for a free action, and then shoot for a free action again. You could just use this 1 time. Another component with movement, whether you're advancing or sprinting, is when you decide to move into a cube that has an enemy character. This will automatically initiate an assault action for free. But we will go over the assault action and how that operates once we get to that action. So that is an advance action and a sprint action and how they operate within the board and the terrain and moving into characters and so on. Now we can get into some shooting. So there is one action you can take that will benefit your shooting, which is called a crouch. When you decide to crouch, you're going to take one of these little tokens here that has a little green arrow. You're going to place it next to your character. And then now, whenever they shoot at an enemy model, they're going to have a bonus die for that shooting attack. They also, if they're crouched and they get shot at, they will have a bonus die for their survive test as well. So sometimes if you have no other actions that you want to take, say you just moved and you can't really shoot, maybe crouch so you can have a little bit of a benefit for when your survivability and also when you shoot later. However, if you ever do move while you have a crouch token, that crouch token is immediately going to go away, whether that is a voluntary move or involuntary move from like some kind of a weapon effect. Another action you can take is an auxiliary action. So an auxiliary action would be something like, say I have a flag here for capture the flag, I can take that action to pick it up so that I can start moving with it. Auxiliary actions are essentially scenario-based, and so your scenario will tell you how to use auxiliary actions. This is a short action, so it can be used in conjunction with another short action. The next action you can take is a stand-up action. On occasion, there are going to be weapons or some effects that are going to add these pinned markers to your models. When you're pinned, you're essentially out of the fight until you stand up. So when you're pinned, you're going to place your model to the side to show that it is out of action at the moment. And then when it comes back to your turn, you have to spend a stand-up action as your first action before you do anything else. So to take a stand-up action is a short action. You will just stand your model up in a square however you wish, and then you're going to get rid of the pinned token. Pinned tokens are also important for fighting and certain keywords that'll reference them. So if you have a pinned token, it's usually a bad thing. So if you can get rid of it as quick as you can, you're going to want to do that. If you have any more questions on how any of these keywords work, like pinned or anything like that, you can always refer to the keywords in the rulebook on page 29. So those are the bulk of the actions. We've already gone through most of it. There's only 2 actions left, shooting and assault. Shooting is a short action, so that's something that you can do after moving, or you can shoot and move, crouch and shoot, and so on. When making a ranged attack, you're first going to determine the range of your weapon, and if you have line of sight. So this weapon here has a ranged value of R6, so that means they can shoot up to 6 spaces away. You're also going to keep in mind any keywords you might have, like optics here or rapid fire. And again, if you have any questions on how keywords work, refer to the rulebook on page 29. But for this scenario here, we are going to explain how optics works, because optics is a really cool keyword that you want to look out for. So say he chooses to shoot down at this model here. The very first thing he's going to do is take 3 dice, add them to his pool, and then determine any modifiers that he might have. So one of the modifiers you can get is if you have a clear line of sight to the model and nothing is obscuring them, so any piece of terrain and such. You're going to get 2 additional dice for having a clear line of sight. And then you got to check, are they elevated over the model? Well, in this case, I am a cube or a level higher than this model here, so I'm going to add another die. Another modifier is going to be if I'm crouched or not. If I'm crouched, I'm going to add an additional die. So it really pays to try to position your models to be higher up than enemy models, crouched, make sure they have clear line of sight, and you get a lot more dice in your attacks. The last modifier is if, say, my friendly model is in the same cube as an enemy model, you can still shoot into that cube against them. However, you're going to subtract 2 dice from your attack. But for the sake of this demo, say my character's over here, and I have a clear line of sight to this brawler right here. So I'm shooting at this model here. I have all my bonuses from clear line of sight, elevated position, crouched. If I have a weapon that has the keyword optics, this will also supply 1 additional die. It has another benefit, but we will get to that in one moment. Next, I'm going to take my pool of dice and I'm going to roll them. Now, the target number I'm looking for is equal or above whatever my range stat is here, which is the RA. In this case, it is a 4+. So I'm going to roll all my dice, and then I'm going to be looking for 4 pluses. So for this roll, I ended up having 4 misses because they were 1 to 3. I had 1 hit for my 4, and then I had 2 7s and an 8. Now, normally when you're making a shooting attack, 8s always explode, whether you're shooting, doing melee, or even defense. So I'll get to roll an additional die, which got me another 4. In addition, if you have optics as a keyword on your weapon, all 7s will also explode. So I get 2 more dice. I rolled a 4 and a 7. And this game has continuous explosions. So since I rolled another 7, I have another explosion. And since I rolled an 8, I have another explosion. And then I rolled a 1 there. So now my explosions end, and my final total for dice are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is 8 hits, which is really good. So you can see in this game that sometimes you're going to get explosions, and even if you only roll, say, 3 dice, 4 dice, you could roll all 8s. You could roll 7s and 8s if you have optics and stuff. So you can really explode into a really good shot. This is what is referred to as a headshot. So I have 8 hits. Next, the enemy model is going to make their survive test. So you're going to look at your card here. It's going to say SV, this is your survive. I'm looking for 5 or higher. First, they're going to take 3 dice for their survive test and then apply any modifiers. If I were crouched here, then I would get +1 to my survive test. However, this model is not crouched, so it's just going to be a straight 3 dice. So they're going to roll, and they're looking for 5s. And remember, on survive test, 8s also explode. So I rolled 2 2s and an 8. So that 8 explodes, it rolled into another 2. So I only had 1 success, which was the 8. You're going to first remove any dice from the hit from the survive test. So this 8 is going to remove one of the successful hits from the attacker. And then after doing the roll, you're going to look at your card and see if there's any energy shields available. Now, in this version of the game, everybody has 2 energy shield. So you're going to have 2 of these blue tokens here. You're going to apply 1 hit to each of these shields. So those 2 shields are going to go away. 2 dice are going to go away from the attack. So now I have 5 attacks going through into this model here. The next thing you're going to look at is a model's armor. This brawler has an armor rating of 2. You're going to compare that to the model that is attacking their weapon, if they have an AP value or not. This model has no AP value, so it has no armor penetration against the opposite model. So then my armor rating of 2 is then going to get rid of 2 more dice. So after the armor penetration, you're going to look at any remaining hits, and then you're going to look at the health of the model. So my health for this brawler is 4, and 3 successful hits went through. So that means 3 wounds are going to be applied to this model, and he'll have 1 life left. And then those shields that were on the card are going to stay depleted until the end of the round, which at the end of the round, you're always going to get back 1 shield. If after you take a shoot action, and you have any of these dice available to you for your command dice, you can take an additional shoot action if you wish, as a free action. But remember, you can't use this multiple times, so if I had 3 of these, I couldn't use all 3 of them. The final action we have is an assault action, which works very similar, but has a few differences. So there are a few different ways that an assault action can trigger. Like I said before, during movement, if you move into a space with an enemy model, this will automatically trigger a free assault action. Or if you were already in a space with a model during your activation, you can choose to use the assault action, which is a long action, so that is the only action you're going to be taking. In addition, if you have this symbol on your command dice, you can also have a free assault action. So you could essentially take 2 assault actions in the same turn. So say my MK7 here decides to take an advance action into this space here with the opposing model that has 1 wound left. So they are going to move into here, position themselves however they wish, and then you're going to go through the process of doing an assault. You're always going to start with 3 dice, just like we did in shooting, and then you're going to apply some modifiers. If you moved into a space and triggered an assault action, you get +2 to your dice. If you have a friendly model that is in the same cube as you, you get an additional die. If the opposing model is injured, you get another die. And if this opposing model was pinned with this little token here, you go into an assault, you get another die. Now, whenever a pinned model is moved into to cause a free assault, they always remove the pinned model and stand right back up. Lastly, if you have this symbol on any of your command dice, you can always add a free die with this. This goes for assaults, shooting, and survive test as well. So let's just say I'll spend this die and I'll add another die. The opponent will then have 3 survive dice to start, and then they will have a few modifiers that might apply. If they have a friendly model in the same space as them, they get an additional die, and if the opposing model is injured, they get another additional die. So the MK7 here that triggered the fight is going to look at their card, and they're looking at the FI stat here, which is a 4+. This is their fight stat. This is what they need to roll when they're doing an assault. So I'm going to take my pool of dice, and I'm looking for 4s or higher. 8s explode. Now, this character doesn't have optics on this assault, so they're not going to explode on 7s or get an additional die. That's usually just on shooting actions. So I roll my dice. So these are misses here. And then I have one explosion with an 8, which rolled into a 7. So then my final total here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now my opponent is going to take their 3 dice, and they're going to be looking for their survive value, which is a 5-up. They rolled 1, 5. The very first thing that's happened is any of the defense dice will get rid of one of the assault dice here. Now this character already has their shields depleted, so then we would go straight to the armor. The armor penetration on this weapon is a 2, and that brawler's armor is a 2. So this weapon completely ignores their armor, so that means all 5 dice are going to go straight to their health, which would knock out that enemy model. Say, for example, though, the brawler still had 2 shields left. You look at the keywords of the melee weapon here. It has the keyword ESD. This is essentially a shield disruptor, so they get to immediately ignore one of the shields before applying hits. So one shield goes away, and then 1 dice will go away, getting rid of the other shield. So that means 4 more dice are still getting through, and it would still take out the model. So assaults can be pretty deadly with the melee weapons in this game. So keep that in mind as you're playing, because some characters are going to be better in a fight than others. There are a few additional actions you can take, which are going to be on these command dice, so we're going to go over those real quick. The first one you can do is the special order die. So in the Recon Edition, everybody has access to this one special order, which is Snapshot. So the way this special order is triggered is if an enemy model moves into a cube with another model, and the opposing model has one of these dice on their symbols, say the red model has that here, he can spend it and he can do the Snapshot special order. What this is it allows him to do a free shoot action with a few limitations. First, he can't do it if another model, enemy model, is already in the space with him, so he wouldn't be able to spend it there. But say he was open here and he moved in, he could spend this special order, he'll get his 3 dice, and then any keywords on his weapons will apply. However, modifiers like high ground, clear shot, friendly fire, and stuff do not apply to this attack. So even though this model walks in and it's completely clear, I wouldn't get any additional dice because of that. So you would get 3 to start, and then if, say, you had optics, that would still apply. But he does not, so then he'll get his free shoot action, trying to do some damage to this model before he gets to them. The last die symbol you can do on your command is the +1 model symbol here. So what this does is after you've activated one of your models, so say this character went, he could spend this die to activate another one of his models fully. So say I spend this, and then that would allow me to activate my Mark 7 here to do their turn. Now you can only ever do this a max of once, so only 2 models can ever activate in the same turn. So I couldn't, if I had 3 of these, I couldn't do it. However, there is one other stipulation. Instead, you can spend this to take the first turn the following round. So normally the first turn will go to the player who finished activating all those models first, but say you have this symbol, you can choose to spend it to go first instead. So it's a good way to get a leg up on your opponent. So after your model is done taking 2 short actions or 1 long action, they will get an activation marker here applied to the model to show that they're done, and then your opponent will get to activate one of their models, and so on until all the models on the board have been activated. After this happens, you'll clear any activation tokens. Each model will get back 1 shield if they've lost any, and then the next turn will go to the player that finished activating all their models first, unless of course someone spent this die here to give themselves the first turn. But that is everything you need to know to get started in Halo Flashpoint. There is of course more advanced rules to learn, like how all the different items and how they work, the weapons, all the different keywords, falling off buildings, getting knocked back, pushing the buildings, and so on. But I will leave that for you to discover in the rulebook. This is just a nice quick way to get you up and running so you have an idea if this is something that you'd be interested in playing. And I really hope you do, because it is a fun game. If you've played Halo multiplayer on the Xbox, this is essentially just a tabletop version of that, and it's a lot of fun. If you enjoyed this content and you want to see more like it, please go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video, share it out. Every little bit helps. We really appreciate it. And we're going to be doing some battle reports of this soon. We have this new Spartan edition coming out in October, so we'll have more content with that. We're really excited for this game and to show it off. But thank you guys again for taking the time to watch this video. I'm Patrick at Battlegrounds Game Center. Until next time, see you later.